It's time to do some TeK Sumo updates. Why am I updating it? Well, basically, um, originally started this off with a 25 amp ESC. The motor was a little old Emax 2205 2300 kV. It ran fine. It did about, I would guess, about 50 miles an hour, which is pretty quick for an airplane. But my Bonsai also does about 50 miles an hour, and what's the point of having a bigger wing if it doesn't go faster than your smaller one? That's my Bonsai up there. That's my newest one, and the older one sitting up on top. They're really cheap as well. This is the version 1 of the TeK Sumo. Hobby King has an updated version of it. Some aesthetics, motor mount's a little bit different, and it's got a little bit better area on the front here for mounting FPV stuff. But it's essentially the same thing. These are essentially pop wings, and I'm not sure if Hobby King got permission, but yeah, I mean they're basically knockoff pop wings. All right, so the upgrades I'm doing. Let me flip this over here. Biggest thing is I'm switching to a F80 motor with a 40 amp ESC. So that's gonna give me a bunch more power than that old Emax motor. I'm also adding. If you notice, these are all quad parts. That's how I build my wing. I get everyone's got a drawer full of parts that they don't use anymore, and I like to pick them out every once in a while and do something like this with them. I'm also adding this RR OSD, which is what you used before flight controllers had built-in OSDs. Back then, you only had a few choices in these. The very first one, I think, was the MM, or the minimum OSD, which was just basically a little daughter board about yay big, and you hooked up your camera and your VTX into it, and you had to program it. And it was actually, it worked really well, but it was fiddly, and you had to know how to program it and all that jazz. I was never really into that. This came out, and there was a plug and play option for it. So I picked one of these up, and I think I got like 2 or 3 more of these sitting in a drawer somewhere. But nice thing about this is it'll do 100 amps. Like I said, I'm only got a 40 amp ESC, so I'm never going to actually see 100 amps on this. If I do, I got a big problem. Basically, your camera plugs in here, VTX plugs into here. It goes through. It'll output your voltage. A timer kicks on. I think it's a 1 amp threshold. Once you get above 1 amps, the timer starts, and then it just keeps running until you unplug it. It gives you amp hours used, and it will give you your current usage or your amp usage while you're flying. The only problem with this board, if you do plan on using one of these, the BEC for the 5-volt BEC is only rated for about 1/4 of an amp, which is not nearly enough to run 2 servos. Even these little 9-gram servos, it's not going to be able to do it. So what you're going to need to do is get a external BEC like I got here. This one's good for 3 amps, and that'll run those little servos all day. And like I said, you just jump power into it, and then you just take the lead over here, and 4-channel receiver. You can see down there, I just plugged it into there on the empty port that it's not using, because you only need 3 channels to do a wing. So that works out pretty easily. Real nice thing is this thing has a very clean 12 volts to run your camera and your VTX. It's filtered 12 volts, and you get a 1/2 amp to do that, which is plenty fine for any VTX system. What else? Oh, this thing uses standard. I had to cut it out a little bit, and I put a little piece of wood in there to stiffen it up a little bit. But this will use a standard quad battery, 13 amp 13 amp hour 4S pack. So it just plugs right in there. And the nice thing about that is that if I'm going out and I think I might have a spot to fly this, I could just throw it in my trunk, and I don't have to worry about going through and charging special packs or anything like that. It's just there if I need it, and if I don't need it, I don't have to worry about discharging any packs if I don't decide to use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these wires, I'm going to tuck everything in. I got to put a battery lead on this as well. Make everything nice and neat. I got a few props that I want to test on this, and I'm going for maximum thrust on this thing. So I'm hoping to get static thrust. Static amps. Hoping to see it pull like around 50, 60 amps. And that way, there when it's flying through the sky, that'll drop down significantly. And like I said, just get the max out of this thing I can. And yeah, so let me tuck all this stuff in, put the cable on there, and I'll try some props. I'll probably show the DVR of when I'm doing the prop test, just the one that I ended up settling on, and you'll see the amps that I'm pulling, and maybe I'll do like a set up a camera so you can actually see the prop spinning, because this thing makes a hell of a lot of noise, especially in a small room like this when you're spinning up a 6-inch prop. So yeah, so let's do that, and be back in a little bit.
It's moving pretty good for that drop. That didn't look good.
All right, test flight debrief. First problem, well, let's start off with the good stuff. FPV system with the new OSD was spot on perfect. I couldn't ask for better. DVR kind of breaks up a little bit more than when I actually see in the goggles, but like I said, it's as good as it gets for these airplanes. Didn't mention this in the original, well, in the beginning of the video. A little worried about this motor mount holding up to the extra force of this big old honking motor, and seemed to hold up pretty good, so I'm happy with that. That's about it for the positives. Negatives. This prop, I'm not happy with it. It makes a lot of noise, and it doesn't. I think I can get more power out of a more plain appropriate prop, so I'm going to do a little digging around and see what I can find for that. The first problem I noticed when I would give this full throttle, my control surfaces would physically lock out, like I had no control whatsoever. It would just basically turn into a dart. I originally thought that maybe it was these servos didn't have the guts to move these control surfaces, but on second thought, these are 12-gram micro servos, metal geared, and I've seen people make these planes go a lot faster than I was going on the cheapo 9-gram plastic servos. So I don't think that's the problem. I think what my problem actually ended up being was the beck that I put in it. I know I said I think I made it, I think it's a 3 amp beck, and I don't think that's actually turned out to be the case. I think it is probably a 1 amp beck, and it's just enough under very little load to push these. But once you really start wailing on them, it just doesn't have the guts to get it moving again. Because as soon as I would get off the throttle and the drag would slow the airplane down, it would start moving again. But I'd get above 3/4 throttle, and this thing would just lock out on me. In the crash I had, there was absolutely no damage to the front of the airplane. This happened. I'm not sure if this was a result of the crash or if this was what caused the crash. I'm starting to believe that it was actually the cause of the crash. Looking at the video, it did do a real lazy rollover. So if this cut loose in flight, I'm only depending on this one side over here, and God knows what's going to happen when you only have one control surface on these things. So I'm going to fix this. This is an easy fix. I just got to get some tape, and then I'm going to reinforce this one, which in hindsight I probably should have did in the first place. And that's about it for that. I do want to, let me flip this over, give this some sort of, well, that slid out of the way too, give this some sort of weatherproofing. So if I do end up flying it in wet grass, I don't want this board to get all shorted out and everything. So I might just end up either conformal coating this board or just slapping a piece of tape over it to keep it dry. So yeah, that's about it. Aside from that, I mean, it did fly nice. It flew as good as it did before. It's just those little problems that I made trying to up the power on this thing. So I'm happy with it, and like I said, this is just a fun experiment thing that I'm doing just to play around with. So stay tuned. I'll make another video like this once I get everything back together. It'll probably be a couple of weeks, but yeah, so check it out, and we'll see what happens. See if I can get one of these things to go really, really fast without exploding. That's kind of the key part. So thanks for watching.